Hello. Welcome to our panel, Taking the Fear Out of Fire. Good afternoon. And I'm Nguyen-Rettig. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Lead North, an implementation partner. And before we introduce, or before the guests introduce themselves, I wanted to say that this panel originally started out based on just our experiences at Lead North, sort of jump-starting or getting organizations into their first implementations or their first adoption of FHIR. And through fate, as FHIR would have it, we actually ended up doing sort of a star search instead. The original panelists couldn't make it, and so I think that what we ended up was even more exciting because we scoured and scanned the InterSystems landscape and community, FHIR landscape and community, and found really a great collection, I'd like to think of them as sort of the Avengers assembled here in order to discuss different experiences with FHIR. But to start off with, wanted to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Just go down the line here. I'm not going to do it according to the slide. I'm going to do it according to the order of seated right here. But if everyone can just go down, introduce yourself, say what organization you're with, and what is your latest involvement with FHIR. We'll start with you, Russell.
Hi, I'm Russ Leftwich. I'm a senior clinical advisor for InterSystems, and I have been involved in the Health Level 7 organization with the development of FHIR since its beginning, and I've done a number of FHIR workshops, 45 of them over the past few years, and full disclosure, my vanity license plate is Dr. FHIR.
Wow, don't know how to follow that. That's awesome. So, certainly sitting next to an expert here. My name is Nikesh Kotecha. I had data science efforts at Stanford Healthcare. We've been thinking a lot about how do we bring data science and AI technologies for our clinicians, for our nurses, for our staff, and as part of that, really thinking about what is that underlying data layer and how do we actually get the data in the right way, in the right place, and FHIR's become one of the ways we're doing that.
Hi, I'm Pat Jameson. I'm a technical product manager at InterSystems. I was initially with the product manager for our FHIR core technologies for 5 years, and then I've transitioned over to technical education on FHIR. So that's what I'm doing full-time, building this FHIR education course. But over the course of my career, I've been involved with all kinds of health technologies, including AI, NLP, expert systems, you name it.
Hey, I'm Krishna Jasti, Principal Software Engineer for Integrations Team at Stanford Healthcare. I've been a InterSystems developer, for the past 15 years. Started on Cache, but recently we are implementing a new dedicated FHIR store, built on top of FHIR for Health, mainly for enabling data for our AI-based applications. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sushant. I work as Director Interoperability for Community Health Systems. We are a health provider with around 70 hospitals. Our journey with FHIR started long back, and as you know, when you say FHIR, if you are using EMR, according to CMS mandate, they have to support FHIR interaction. But we have a central FHIR repository also. We have a hybrid architecture to source data from multiple EMRs and ambulatory systems into our FHIR repository. So FHIR provided us speed to market to create that clinical data model.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Now, something before we get into the questions for the panel. I didn't warn you, but I am a former high school teacher, and so there's a little bit of audience participation here. I wanted to ask, we've had a lot of FHIR panels in several summits or conferences now, and it's been in the atmosphere for quite a bit. So I wanted to check in with the audience here. Just give me by a show of fingers, and I'm going to scan the audience. What is your FHIR readiness? What is your self-reported FHIR readiness? And so I've heard a bunch of vocabulary, attended some workshops here perhaps, and done a lot of Googling. Give me a 1. If you feel that I've started dabbling, I've started looking into perhaps a connect-a-thon, doing some code, give me a 3. And if you are, my organization is implementing FHIR or my team is building FHIR applications and we are in the thick of the heat, give me a 5. So 1, 3, or 5, just give me, you don't have to like show it high if you're not sure either. You can kind of hide it next to your chest. Love to see the range, but I see a lot of 5s, which is great too. So I really hope that this will be a really dynamic conversation between all of us, because we were, as I was saying, as we assembled the Avengers here, I think that what made it exciting is just in finding everyone, the conversations that we had were really, really, I think, educational, beneficial to me, and I think that's what we were hoping the attendees here would get out of it. I think regardless of your range, I wanted to let you know what we're focusing on, or what the theme of this panel is what are the lessons learned, and what does it take to take that first leap into FHIR? Because there's a lot of talk, the organizations that we've worked with as Lead North, a lot of talk, a lot of planning, but what is it that kind of gets you to take that first leap? What are the decisions that need to be made? What sort of obstacles need to be overcome? So we have, I also want to say this, we will have time for questions at the end, but with such a large panel, I wanted to make sure that we got our material out. So definitely hold questions, but we will give you a block of time at the end to get those asked. So starting off with, this is a rapid fire question. So quickly, tell me, and I'm going to go down the line, I'm going to start from the other opposite end, so with Sushant, down the line. The question is, what questions or concerns, what are the biggest questions or concerns that you address most often regarding FHIR?
So the questions would be, will current HL7 feeds go away with FHIR? So usually they have to coexist, right? So that is one of the concerns. And other thing is, what is the learning curve associated with FHIR? So what is the journey like? Yeah. So I always start with the simple use cases, get your learning in, and then provide the value with the quick.
So was that is previous HL7 compatible, and
yeah.
Then learning curve? Excellent. Yeah. So next in line, Krishna, biggest concerns you address?
Yeah, the main concerns is definitely, as Sushant mentioned, right? Are we still keeping the same feeds, or are we replacing them, right? But on top of it, mainly, what are the benefits, we are getting out of that, FHIR implementations, right? So things like, they wanted to know, is it, obviously, we have a lot of business stakeholders, who has concerns, whenever we talk about FHIR, because that is something they have not done before, or maybe for the particular use case, it is definitely a better suit, right? So of course, we have to explain them the benefits that comes out of FHIR, mainly the whole industry adoption, right? And then, and also when it comes to customization, because people, and there is a belief that, it is a fixed format, but obviously there is a whole customization and extensions we can do. So that kind of feedback back to the business stakeholders, just to make sure, they are aware of the whole benefits we are getting out of these FHIR implementations.
So it sounds like many stakeholders and multiple concerns is what we're seeing. Next, Patrick.
Yeah, I'd break it down into two groups. For those who put a 1 or a 3, I've interacted with many of you, and I would say the biggest concern is, how can I learn enough to build FHIR applications? Where can I get the training I need to do it? For those that are 5s, I think the concerns transition to performance and scalability frequently. They want to know, can we really scale this thing up to enterprise level, or in some cases, country level? So it kind of depends on where you are in that maturity curve. But there's a lot of people looking for training.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's sort of wherever you are, there's more to learn. Next up.
So kind of building off of that, so I think scalability is something I think a lot about, or I hear a lot about. And then the second is data science approaches. So, FHIR is not built for analytics. How am I going to do that? How am I going to think about my pieces, and what is data validation going to look like?
So I am always concerned about what is written about FHIR and that it's made to sound like a killer app and that it's interoperability out of the box and that FHIR apps are plug and play, and I think none of that is true. And people should realize going into it that they need to have a strategy and support the individual projects around FHIR that are not going to be plug and play, but can offer a lot of value usually at the departmental level, not at the organizational level, but enabling those across the organization is an important aspect of strategy.
Yeah, I really appreciate those answers, and I would say, as you were saying, Russell, I think there's the largest concern or question we get as implementers is don't you still have to map? Don't you still have to transform? And along with that, how did they solve the terminology problem? And it's this idea of like, well, did FHIR solve all our problems? And that it's promised to be so slick that I think that's a common misconception. So it doesn't exactly do all that, but I think it does give some answers that are really interesting. So as I mentioned, the purpose of the panel was to talk about what did it take to sort of take that first leap into FHIR, and I think this is a good opportunity to hear about some of the use cases as an organization. How did you decide, and what are you doing as sort of your initial implementations into FHIR? I'm going to start with, let's start with Sushant on that. Oh, didn't realize it moved all the way.
So mostly we needed FHIR support for a lot of vendors nowadays. They want their applications are FHIR enabled. They want the data in FHIR format, like most of the disease detection application and other things. So we want it to be FHIR ready. So our EMR support that. And secondly, our data science team and AI team, they wanted data in the FHIR format at least, because most of them are AI, API first mindset, right? So it is easy to get and send data in FHIR format. So having that FHIR enabled data model and where it is easy to run their use cases, like some of the things we have is we get the denials from insurance company. Now we are auto-generating appeals for the denials, clinical document improvement, summarization, and all that use cases we have built on our FHIR data store.
Yeah, well, that sounds really interesting, because I heard you're getting a variety of data formats from FHIR, from your EHRs, and also like denials for claims and things like that. But that sounds like the FHIR dream, right? When we start interchanging and exchanging data in FHIR seamlessly. I'm sure it didn't start out so seamless. What was kind of that first, first implementation that got you into it?
So first implementation is, you are very right. We have to start from the basics, right? Find the basic use case, find the low-hanging fruit, which is the easiest. The ADTs was one of the things we were thinking that, okay, that is the easiest way to go to FHIR and build use cases around that, the admit discharge messages. So we started with that, and normalizing data is a big thing, right? Like you said, somebody said, FHIR is not going to solve all your problem, data quality problem and all that. So that's how we started.
What was the easiest case that you identified?
So we had a lot of variability in EMRs and terminology mapping and all that. If we do that and having the standardization of coding and all that, that helps a lot if you do all that groundwork in advance. So we had like 5-6 different EMRs. Even we have same EMR, each location could have different coding implemented. So.
Yeah, it's what they say, and this is something I keep on hearing from one of my developers this week, is if you want to eat a whale, right? If you want to eat a whale, you got to start with one bite at a time.
Yeah. So always say that, identify the basic use cases, which is the easiest one to implement, and start with that. Get familiar with the FHIR journey. Yeah.
Excellent. And now, Nikesh, I hear that you have a really interesting use of FHIR that you've worked on.
Yeah, so So, and I'm not sure if it's the first one. So we've been, as an organization, we've built some smart and fire apps through different groups. But what we really were struggling with was how do we get access to information about our patients in real time or near real time as they were kind of coming through the hospital. And in order to be able to kind of get to that information, working with our integration team, Krishna in particular, really thinking through what is the best way I can get that data delivered so that we can use it in our AI models downstream. And that became became the de facto way of thinking about it. And then, kind of with that eye towards not only can we do it for the data we have now, but also other data we may want to bring in later as well.
So from what I hear, so you were actually thinking of building something where you could enable fire enablement going forward as well when you built your solution?
Yes, it wasn't the first thing in our head. Our first thing was, I need to get this data in a performant way for things we needed to kind of get done. But again, having the ability with FHIR to later have other things come in was not a bad thing to think about.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that, Patrick, you were saying your focus is actually training for FHIR. So you probably deal quite a bit with organizations or implementers who are sort of new and getting into FHIR. Can you talk a little bit about your experience about how do those players make that decision? What do they need to get to that first step?
Very interesting. Well, I think we have to just step back one little bit here to see what were the principal visions around FHIR, and I think it's really twofold. One, they want to jumpstart innovation. We want all these innovation or innovative apps, and prior to FHIR, those innovative apps were all really tightly woven by the EMR vendors, and so they wanted to go beyond that. The second vision was we want to share information outside of the hospital's four walls, because the problem of integrating systems inside the hospital was largely solved when EMRs became ubiquitous, but not outside. So what that translates into is, first, why don't we have all these innovative apps? People don't necessarily want to have to always build them themselves. They'd like third parties to do that. Russ will tell you why that is. And then the second problem is, if we're going to share all this information, what are the best use cases? And I do think that there are several. Some of them have already been mandated by the government. So patient access API, for example. But the other one, I think, and this could be the killer app, I'm not saying it is, but I think it might be, is prior authorization. It's just my opinion, though.
And are those two use cases sort of the big drivers of what bring people to you for FHIR training?
Yes.
So I have another question here for the entire panel. Now this is lessons learned. So what do you feel was sort of the big warning or mistakes that were made? What were the lessons learned from your early FHIR involvement? So we'll start with Russell and go down the line here.
Well, I have learned a lot from my audiences educating about FHIR and what people believe that isn't true and what they need to know. It really starts with a basic understanding of the FHIR model that is underneath FHIR. Whether you're going to use a FHIR app or build a FHIR app, that's the first thing that you need to understand. And so I think it's important for people to really not just understand what the app does, but how it does it.
Yeah, I think when you start looking for FHIR, you start looking for a solution in FHIR, it's tempting to be like, something out there must already exist that does what I need to do. And I think that's one of the challenges, is how do we sift through this ocean, right, of solutions and
Right.
killer apps.
And there's a difference between the technology of FHIR and the data model and the data that FHIR enables you to access and use. That the FHIR workshops that I have done started out in the HL7 organization, in the FHIR community, when a developer named David Hay built a modeling app for clinicians to use to test FHIR resources that were being developed. And we started doing an exercise at each of the 3 HL7 meetings a year called Clinicians on FHIR. Well, when we had our first couple of instances of that exercise, we knew we had to teach people what FHIR was before we started using it to test the clinical validity, if you will. Well, the audience turned out to be 90 people, but only 5 of them were clinicians. The rest were developers in the FHIR community who didn't really understand the FHIR data model.
Yeah, I think we've seen this quite a bit as FHIR is thought of a little bit as sort of a developer's or a techie's dream, but getting clinicians and the rest to kind of come on board is I think a lot of...
And getting the developers to understand the clinical data.
Developers love
Yep.
FHIR. Nikesh, what about you? What would you say lessons learned from your early FHIR involvement?
I'd build off of what Russell was saying. I think 2 things, right? Implementations are going to differ. So just like verify your implementations, whatever you think it is. And just like any standard, everything is very incentive driven. So, to the extent that is allowed, certain vendors will put their version of an implementation to only kind of that line that they need to get to, right? Unless they have a very specific incentive to do even more than that. And that definitely is one of the things we keep seeing over and over in healthcare. And whether it be on the payer side, whether it be on the provider side, I think these incentives definitely come into play whenever standards are being put out. And so I think we have a long ways to go in some ways, but it's still exciting what you can enable even with what's out there right now.
One thing I think we could all appreciate in this room is that FHIR has matured tremendously over the last 5 to 10 years, but it's still maturing. And what that challenges people is that they have to drive very hard to educate themselves as what's going on. There's just so much technology and obviously evolution of the standard itself that makes education critical. And so that's what I see all the time is people looking for answers to oftentimes very technical problems, but also to just getting basic education in the standard.
Yeah, so one of the main lesson we have learned, at least with our implementation of FHIR, right, or with our adoption, we understand how EHR systems, how those EHR systems make it really difficult to export it out of them and then bring into the FHIR server, right? So we realized that those systems or those EHR systems does not actually support dollar everything or dollar export, which you would thought so, right? But and even and then we looked into their CCDs, and then we realized that even their patient summary CCD does not actually contain all the encounters. It only contains last 3 months of labs or last 3 months of encounters, right? So we went on the journey to really on that bumps, right, to learn about, we thought we can do this, but EHR does not support that. And then we also went on to see what does bulk FHIR SIMS be a right approach. And then we realized those EHR systems takes days to generate those resources. Even they don't even include binaries in that bulk query, right? So there are a lot of bumps we learn along the way, but eventually we figured out a way. We call it as disassemble and then assemble, right? So we grab those individual pieces from the EHR, and then we and then we reassemble them, when it comes to Firestore. But yeah, that's the main lesson we have learned, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of complexities in the data that don't go away. And Sushant, lessons learned?
I think most of them I've covered, but our organization alignment is very important, talking with stakeholders, explaining what is our maturity level, right? When we say FHIR ready, you have to be very careful when you say FHIR ready. It's not that it's a journey you have to take basically. So it's a journey, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, Sushant. Like talking to the stakeholders, I think as technical staff, right? I think you get the adoption pretty quickly. It gets exciting when you can see what you can do and how quickly you can do it with FHIR. But then the blockers are actually not technical, and it's something implementers have said forever, right? The hard thing is the agreements, the business agreements, the legal agreements, the compliance issues. The technology can go really fast, but you kind of need to check yourself a little bit and make sure there's buy-in before you go off and build something that is ultimately not what can be used in the end. So those are all really great insights there. Wanted to check in now. So if we want to make sure we give time for everybody, so here's another rapid fire question for the whole group. And this one is, all right, so we talked about getting FHIR ready. If you were to give one hack, so one usable thing for someone, a developer or an organization who wants to get FHIR ready tomorrow, what is your one hack? What's some usable advice there? So we're going to go in the opposite direction. Actually, let's start in the middle. So we'll do Patrick, and then I'll call on people. One hack. One hack.
Okay. If the organization is interested in FHIR analytics, I definitely think you should look at tools like the FHIR SQL Builder to enable you to do that, because that is a very difficult use case in terms of analyzing FHIR data for data science or analytics.
All right, Nikesh, one hack.
So my rapid fire answer is actually, Patrick did a session yesterday where he showed a bunch of these tutorials, and it's actually on my list to go back and get that environment set up so I can do more. But I would actually say that's probably a great place to get started.
Oh, wonderful. So check out that session. They're all recorded as well, so. One hack, Russell.
I think identify one person in the organization that actually has some experience and can be the go-to question answer if the project gets stuck.
I love it. You get the point of the point of contact, the person who can be responsible. Krishna, one hack.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest taking a look at the transformations, right? Because again, depending on the source you have, and if your the application you use, right? If it has out-of-the-box transformation, like for example, HL7 to FHIR or CCD to FHIR, or as long as that out-of-the-box transformations are out there, that's definitely going to solve the main problem, right? But obviously you still have to normalize the data, because you have data coming through multiple pipelines. Obviously you have to streamline and then make sure all these different sources of data eventually being landed, and then and updating the correct patient resource, right? Or not creating duplicates, for example. So definitely that's something you'll have to pay attention. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And Sushant, your one hack?
Call InterSystems maybe. just kidding. I would say one of the things when you have disparate data sources or fragmented, EMPI is mostly overlooked and it is an afterthought. I would say EMPI and terminology services is something you should look from the start.
Excellent. All good advice. I would say my one hack would be to join a FHIR Connectathon. I like to think of when I was trying to learn how to play craps a long time ago. I'm not good at it. And I was standing by the table and waiting and sort of trying to figure out the game, right? And it was very complicated. There's all these numbers and all the rules kind of pay out different money. And then someone said, look, if you want to learn, just put some money on that line. If you put some money on that line, then all of a sudden everything is going to become much more relevant and you're going to learn how to play craps. I learned how to play craps. I lost $200 over the next, hour, but I definitely learned. I think Fire Connect-a-thon is a much less risky way, but I think you put, yourself, put your resources, put some effort into a Fire Connect-a-thon, and I found that community has been a fabulous way to just jump in and really know how to do it.
I'll second that and say that there is tremendous networking value in a Fire Connect-a-thon beyond participating in one of the actual tracks of the Connect-a-thon.
Excellent. Now, one final rapid fire question before we open up to questions from the audience. And the rapid fire question is, what is the fire pun that describes you best? What is your fire pun? Because the best thing about fire, you must admit, is the puns. So I'm going to start with Sushant. What is your fire pun?
I used to lead a solution team, and they used to say I bring calm when solutioning multiple teams. I would say fire extinguisher or something.
Fire solutions. What about you, Krishna? What is your fire pun?
I guess at Stanford, we are probably one of the early adopters of fire because, even back in 2018, we have a use case, where we are transforming ADT messages into a bundle resource for a clinician communication application. I think it's called OLT. So yeah, we at Stanford we always call ourselves as a first responder, but using fire, we are doing that first responder being at
First
Stanford.
responders. Love it. Fire pun, Patrick.
I'd say my little pun is I would call myself trial by fire because so much of what I do is application development that goes down many dead ends. But the good news is if you keep at it long enough, you'll find a path to success. But trial by fire would be mine.
I'm very much still in kind of the newbie stage of this, so still learning how to fan the fire, I guess.
Love it. Fan the fire.
Just like get your hands on fire.
Love it. I would definitely say that I'm playing with fire. Now let's go to the audience questions. Questions for the panel or any comments about your fire experience, fire enablement. And I don't know if we have, I see here we go. Thank you, Justin.
You mentioned that your use case, you should tailor the fire implementation to the use cases. Does that also include the creation of a repository? Like, have you found cases where you needed to have multiple repositories to support multiple use cases, or has your experience been that you could solve everybody's problem with one big repository?
Is there someone who'd like to grab? I think Krishna is.
Yeah, at least in our setting right now, it is just one single repository. We're just capturing all the data, clinical and non-clinical, everything together. But yeah, currently, of course, we're mainly focused on EHR data, but we have plans to expand that to, for example, provider credentialing systems or maybe some imaging data as well. That comes from PACS as well, yeah.
So the vision today is one repository, but as much as possible, we can stay there.
So I think there are a lot of use cases that don't require a repository, and there are a lot of use cases where people think there's a repository, but there isn't. The most common of those is EHRs. I find a lot of people who are new to fire think that there's fire in an EHR. There is not. It's the EHR API is a fire facade, and so a lot of things can be done without a repository, and I think it's important to realize that as well, although there are a lot of things that can't be done without a repository.
Thank you there. We have a question up front. Oh, Justin is on it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mystery behind FHIR, and some people think that FHIR is this one big solution that they can implement right away. we have a fire server, but we don't really know how to capture the information and provide that information to the people that can use it. We also have a data warehouse where a lot of data is stored and aggregated, but we don't know how to marry that data with what's inside our EHR and how we can present that to our providers so that they can make good decisions on the health care of our patients.
Yeah, I think this is a great use case. I think it's a very common use case. So I'm really interested to hear what people's experiences are. So there is legacy data or data warehouse, and then a new shiny, a shiny hot FHIR server. How do you marry the two? Some thoughts on that from the panel?
So I guess I would go kind of more practical, like regardless of the approach or the technology or the storage components, what is the problem to be solved, and can that be defined, right? To kind of echo what Russell said, not everything's going to need a repository. Not everything needs to be transformed. And it's kind of really coming down to like, what is it that would actually be valuable for the provider to answer? And then, the tool sets we have in our tool belt include a legacy data warehouse or a data table, a FHIR call, a FHIR repository, and it's coming down to like, how do we bring those together to answer that specific question, is the way we think about it. So we don't have to use any one of those things. It's really what is needed to kind of solve the problem as we think about it.
Yeah, and what's the problem you're trying to solve? That may have different solutions depending on what problem your clinicians are trying to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked in the electronic medical records industry, and as probably people in this room know, there are thousands of tables inside Epic, Cerner, Athena, it doesn't matter. Not all that data is going to ever be exposed via FHIR. Maybe never even exposed via an API. So you have to make decisions. The government, through CMS patient access rules, payer to data exchange, they're focused on some fairly well-defined use cases. But just to answer that in general, your question would be super complex. Just consider the synchronization between your FHIR repository and your EMR. It would be, at an abstract level, it would be extremely difficult. So you got to really narrow the scope of that.
So it sounds like it's going back to something that Sushant had said, which is find a very important and easy, visible use case to kind of focus your efforts on, and then from there, it might be a place to expand, to marry those two sources.
Talk to InterSystems, I think.
We have a question in front.
Yeah, so you were just talking about the government and CMS requirements and how they're focused on specific use cases, but it's also leading some of the industry use cases and how it's being implemented. So would love to understand either the recommendation or maybe the approach for anyone that's doing it of how, as FHIR as a standard changes, right, R3 is 2.3, R4, R6 is imminent, and then we also have our US CDI requirements. Like, how do you migrate from those versions, and how do you do that in an efficient way?
I think the good news, at least for the next foreseeable future, is that the government will not make us move off of R4 for quite some time. So I think if you standardize on R4, you're safe for quite a bit of time. But nothing's forever. And I mean, all these software systems, you're going to have to, it will require effort to make the migrations. But I think with R6, I'm hopeful that there'll be a conversion paths that will be reasonable. They're not going to be totally free.
Yeah, one of the things that the government clearly doesn't understand, among many things, is the software development cycle and the optimization cycle for new technology. And R5 was published 3 years ago. Nobody's using it because they're still busy with R4 and will be. The government requirements for R4 don't end until 2027. So yeah, it's going to, as Pat says, it's going to happen sometime, but not in the immediate future at all.
I guess, is there a recommendation on how to stay at that forefront, right? It's like you said, if you spend your time going to R4, and then by the time you get there, that could be a year or two down the line. So should you be chasing the future or chasing the current standard?
So just to summarize, in case people didn't hear that, the question was, is there a recommendation for how to maybe future-proof, or how do you protect yourself against the sort of ever-changing, ever-evolving standards?
So I have a kind of pragmatic, maybe depressing view on this. So it's gonna be driven by policy, and it's gonna be driven by whatever the stick is from a policy perspective. It's gonna happen, at least for the U.S. So like sticking to the U.S., right? So, and we only have a handful of vendors who are gonna be mandated to do this, and it's not just an EHR thing, right? We've seen this with other standards, with any big instrumentation provider that's out there, right? So if you're trying to figure out what you need to like standardize to or keep in mind, right? I think we just heard the answer. You're going to be on R4 at least until 2027, maybe a little bit longer. And so now it's really going to come down to like, do you want to go to R6 because it is going to give you some sort of an advantage for the types of things you want to build on top and understand, versus are you just trying to make sure that you can be in compliance with whatever is needed? So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's how I think about it.
I think as a longtime interoperability integrationist, I think it kind of calls back to the original questions of integration, right? How do we integrate, or how do we build in a way where we protect ourselves against change, or at least prepare ourselves for change? And I think that's not a FHIR question, it's sort of a universal interoperability question. So the same things like canonical data models and modal design and things like that. But I think that what I find with FHIR and looking at it is the amount of visibility that the change has, and that sort of the change is documented in a certain way. The change is released in a certain way, right? Those things, I find that they're more predictable than when I had to design for change in the past. So that's my optimistic view about FHIR, just as a technology person, is I do feel that question's always been there, but FHIR gives me a little bit better, clearer of an answer than other standards have in the past, especially if more people adopt it and become FHIR friendly, FHIR forward in their thinking.
So here's an idea that may be wishful thinking, may be delusional, but I really think with what we're seeing with AI, that AI may help us go from R4 to R6, and make it feasible to do in a reasonable time. I'm actually hopeful about that, seeing what you can do if you've asked AI to help you with creating some FHIR content resources. It's amazing what it can do out of the box.
No, not to say that AI can't help, but just the fact that FHIR is machine readable and machine consumable, like the way that the integration, the implementation guides are presented. You could do it with just intelligence as well. So I think, yeah, AI might have some exciting possibilities there, but even without thinking of AI doing it, this is why developers love FHIR, right? I think there's some promise with the way that the standard is structured, right? That gives us the ability to perhaps code or programmatically handle some of those changes. So we are in the last couple minutes. I want to thank everyone in the panel for coming together and sharing your stories with short notice, especially with this busy schedule. There are many, many exciting both AI and FHIR presentations. Make sure that you attend them. And I just want to give you this. sign up for the early access program. So if you'd like to sign up for the early access program, I'm not an employee of InterSystems, but I was, I was encouraged to put this on all the presentations. So you can use the QR code, join in. I'm definitely a part of it, and there's a lot of useful sort of insights to see the new products. Also, please give us your feedback. So there will continue to be FHIR presentations at these summits or these conferences. Let us know how you think this one went. So go to the Ready app, and under your profile, you can click on surveys. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to the panel. This has been really, really eye-opening and a great, fun discussion. Thank you very much.